Welcome to This Explainer. We're looking at a fascinating dynamic today, the sanctuary that does not hear and the child who begins to hear. So, settle in, take a breath, and let's just unpack 1 Samuel chapter 3 together at a comfortable, unhurried pace. Let's dive right in.
You know, there's this old saying, when a huge flood hits, there's actually no water to drink. Sounds totally counterintuitive, right? I mean, water is literally everywhere. But here's the catch, it's all completely polluted. It won't save your life. So having a massive volume of something doesn't actually mean you have the one thing you desperately need.
Section 1. Era of a word flood. Lots of info, no hearing. Now, I bring up that flood metaphor because it perfectly and honestly kind of tragically mirrors our spiritual reality right now. We are absolutely living in an era of a word flood. Think about it. One click, you've got a sermon. Reach into your pocket, boom, a Bible app. We are quite literally drowning in content every single day. But here is the kicker. The problem today isn't a lack of information. Strangely enough, as the words have multiplied, our ability to genuinely hear has gotten, well, duller. We've got a massive surplus of info, but a total famine of actual obedience. Just look at the stark contrast in how we react to different signals. We are hypersensitive to the world, right? If the Wi-Fi drops for a fraction of a second, we lose it. If your phone buzzes, you're grabbing it instantly to see who texted or what news just broke. We react right away to opinions, to money, but when it comes to the voice of God, we are remarkably blunt, delayed. Our spiritual antennas are totally broken, but because we're so distracted by all the noise, we don't even notice the static.
Section 2. Sanctuary that cannot hear, moving but empty.
And that brings us right into the historical text of 1 Samuel chapter 3, looking at an era that, quite frankly, feels a lot like our own. We're in Shiloh. There's a sanctuary, a priest, sacrifices being made, a burning lamp. On paper, the whole religious machine is running flawlessly. But the text gives this devastating diagnosis. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. The gears are turning on the outside, but inside, the ability to genuinely hear God was just disappearing. And the text brilliantly illustrates this through two totally opposite characters. On one hand, you have Eli. He's the priest, the guy running the show. But his physical eyesight is failing, which is this incredibly powerful metaphor for his severe spiritual darkness. He knows his sons are corrupting the sanctuary, but he just ignores their sin. He goes through the motions with the word, but there's no reverence. He doesn't tremble before it. Then on the flip side, you've got young Samuel, just a kid. Spiritually immature, sure, but he's resting right near the ark of God. He's sensitive, and as we're going to see, he's primed for immediate action.
But right in the middle of all that darkness, with a corrupt sanctuary and a spiritually blind priest, we get this tiny, beautiful glimmer of hope. The text says, the lamp of God had not yet gone out. I want you to just pause and sit with that for a second. The oil might be practically dry. The whole situation looks like a lost cause. But God leaves a wick burning. Right when human logic says it's completely over, God still sees a spark. He hasn't abandoned his people.
Section 3. Child who begins to hear. Immediate obedience.
So before that lamp completely burns out, before the dawn even arrives, God makes his move. And he doesn't kick off some massive institutional reform or a loud, flashy event. No, in the quiet dead of night, breaking the heavy silence of this totally deaf sanctuary, God calls out to the kid who just positioned himself near the ark. Let's look at how this sequence plays out, because Samuel's reaction is absolutely fascinating. God calls Samuel, but Samuel doesn't recognize the voice yet. He thinks it's Eli, so what does he do? He literally jumps up in the dark and runs to Eli. Here I am, he says. Eli sends him back to bed. And guys, this happens not once, not twice, but 3 times. Samuel keeps getting it wrong, but notice something. The Bible never rebukes him for it. Why? Because Samuel's issue wasn't stubbornness. He just lacked experience. His discernment was imperfect, but his obedience, immediate. It's actually incredibly beautiful. He just keeps running in the dark, totally ready to serve. Eventually, Eli figures out what's happening and tells Samuel exactly how to respond.
To really grasp what happens next, we have to look at the Hebrew word for hearing used in this text, Shema. Now, biblical hearing is not just about sound waves hitting your eardrums. It's definitely not about just binging podcasts or stacking up theological information. To Shema means to literally engrave the word into your heart and fully submit your life to it. It means handing over the steering wheel. In the biblical sense, truly hearing equals obeying. They are the exact same thing.
So on the 4th call, Samuel replies exactly how Eli taught him. Speak, for your servant is listening. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, God, tell me what I want to hear, and then I'll decide if I want to listen. He doesn't ask God to greenlight his personal plans first. He just says, I'm the servant,
You're the master. You lead. And I find that incredibly comforting. God isn't demanding that Samuel have perfect knowledge from day one. He's just looking for an open heart and a willingness to react immediately.
Section 4. Words not falling, delivering truth.
But this kind of immediate obedience leads to a pretty heavy reality for young Samuel. Because the very first word God gives this boy, it is not a warm, comforting blessing. There's no promise of massive success. It is actually a terrifying, heavy message of absolute judgment on Eli's household, the very guy who raised and mentored him. Naturally, Samuel was terrified to tell Eli about this vision the next morning. It's basic human nature, right? We want to avoid conflict. We want to just keep the peace. But here is the absolutely crucial point. True hearing means you cannot hide the word. If you're entrusted with the truth, you don't get to edit it just because it's not advantageous. God's word has to be delivered when it brings deep comfort, absolutely, but it also must be delivered when it brings a sharp rebuke. The key is that it's done with a trembling mix of awe and genuine love, never just used as a weapon.
And because Samuel had the bravery to not hide that difficult word, look at the result. The text says God let none of Samuel's words fall to the ground. Since Samuel wasn't just spouting his own opinions but was faithfully delivering what God actually said, God backed him up entirely. Through the obedience of this one child who was willing to listen and speak a really hard truth, the channel of the word was completely restored to an era that was completely starving for it.
Section 5. Again, to the listening place. Grace to hear.
So where does this actually leave us today? You know, hearing a story like this might honestly leave you feeling a little weighed down by your own failures to listen. You might be thinking about the times you dragged your feet or let the noise of the world completely drown out the truth. And if our hope rested entirely on our own determination to be exactly like Samuel, we would be in serious trouble. Because let's face it, our ears close pretty easily and our obedience is usually pretty calculated. But we couldn't wrap up this explainer without pointing out where Samuel's story ultimately leads. Samuel offered incredible obedience when he said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." But Jesus Christ offered perfect obedience in the Garden of Gethsemane when he said, "Not as I will, but as you will." We are absolutely called to obey like Samuel, but the actual power to do it, our ability to stand back up after we've totally failed and ignored God's voice, that comes entirely from Jesus' perfect obedience on our behalf.
So the real challenge here is moving from just feeling passively inspired by a story to taking concrete action. If you hear the word, don't hide it in your actual everyday life. What does that look like? Well, at home, it might mean swallowing your pride and apologizing first, instead of just ignoring the issue to keep a superficial peace. At the workplace, it means choosing honesty, even when the whole office culture is pressuring you to cut corners. And in your relationships, it means having the courage to speak the truth with love instead of just trying to preserve everyone's mood. Taking one small act of obedience is your way of saying, "Speak, Lord," right in the middle of your daily routine.
We've covered a lot of ground today, but I want to leave you with this one final lingering thought. Take a hard look at your own life, your habits, the things that distract you, and your responses. Ask yourself honestly, am I becoming a sanctuary that does not hear? Just surrounded by Bibles and sermons, but spiritually deaf and stuck in my own ways? Or am I a child who has begun to hear? Maybe imperfect, maybe still learning, but running toward the call, totally ready to obey. The choice is yours. Take some time to really pause, reflect deeply on that, and step back into that listening place.